Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. They say there's no greater betrayal than discovering someone you trusted has been keeping secrets. Today on rSpace, OP shows us what ambition gets you. It was all just smoke and mirrors. Wife told her affair partner I was predictable and I would never leave her. I blindsided her with divorce papers on our anniversary. There's nothing worse than finding out what someone really thinks about you. You go through your whole life thinking someone actually loves you and for who you are, only to find out that none of it was real. It hurts like nothing else. Sorry if this comes across as all doom and gloom. I'm still raw about all this. I, 31 male, met my wife, Cassie, 30 female, 10 years ago when we were both in college. We were polar opposites in a way. I was quiet and reserved, always in my dorm room studying and reading. She was a social butterfly. She had a magnetic personality, made friends effortlessly, and loved going out to have fun. You know the type. Her social media was all cocktails, group shots, and restaurant selfies. Our relationship shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. We had the usual ups and downs, some disagreements and fights, but nothing out of the ordinary. It really felt like we would go the distance. We got married 2 years after graduation. I'd landed a decent job, and she took some time off to figure out her career path. I didn't mind. I was earning pretty well at the time. She studied education in college and decided she didn't like her career prospects, so I supported her while she explored her options. At first, it felt like a team effort. She'd talk about wanting to start a business or going back to school, and I believed her. That's what marriage was supposed to be about, supporting each other's plans and having each other's backs. Well, a few years passed and nothing changed. She still wasn't pursuing anything, just bouncing from idea to idea with nothing to show. Meanwhile, I was working my butt off covering the bills and trying to save for our future. I brought this up often, telling her that she needed to focus and figure out her plan. She always assured me that she was close to figuring it out, but looking back, I realized she was just stalling. Some people might think I was enabling her, but it really was a hot-button topic in our home. We fought often and I got frustrated with her lack of direction. She seemed to get started with something and ditch it after a few months because it didn't feel right. So I was a bit skeptical when she told me she wanted to start going to law school. She could tell I wasn't convinced and insisted that she meant it. It turned out that she'd actually applied and gotten in. She even showed me an acceptance letter. All she needed me to do was pay the tuition, and she'd be a law student. I was so ecstatic that she was finally making a move that I agreed immediately. At the time, she told me that the semester was starting in about 3 months. I tried to stay on top of the situation, asking if she had everything she needed. I really wanted her to succeed in law school. I didn't want her to have a chance to flake out on this as well. She told me she was eager to get started, and I believed her completely. It wasn't until the semester was supposed to have started that I noticed some odd behavior. She went out often enough, but she never seemed as busy as I would have expected a new law student. I never saw her reading either. When I asked about her classes, she'd say it was all fine, and that she wasn't studying because there was still an introductory stuff. That sounded reasonable enough for me to believe. The thing about this is that she really went out almost daily. There was no real reason for me to suspect that she'd been lying to me. If I asked about her classes or her day, she always had a tale ready for me. There were classmates and professors, and the whole narrative was airtight and consistent. You know how your partner tells you about their day and their coworkers, and you start to feel like you know these people? That's how it was for me and her classmates. The only issue was that none of these people existed. I figured that out when she started to get careless. She started coming home late, telling me that she had a study group that got together in the evenings. Once again, that felt legitimate enough. That was until she came home late one evening, obviously more than a little tipsy. She gave me the usual study group story and said they'd gone for drinks after. I wasn't buying it this time. She'd never come home this late, and never this drunk. I got a little confrontational and asked her where her textbooks were. She stammered at first and then told me she'd left them behind. A friend had picked them up for her. I knew in my bones that she was lying to my face, so I asked her to show me some pictures that she'd taken with her friends tonight. Even with how wasted she was, she still looked surprised. She stammered when she told me that she hadn't taken any photos. That was when I was completely certain that she was lying. Every single time we went out together, she'd take dozens of photos. She always needed to get some pictures of herself, us together, and her food. There was no way she went out with friends and didn't take a single picture. I made my disbelief clear and asked her if she really went out with friends. She claimed that she had and started listing off who she went out with. They were more of the same names that she had mentioned before. She was so indignant and tearful that I actually started to believe her and started feeling bad. We had a little argument about it and I backed off. She really was wasted, and after an hour or two, she was out like a light. That was when I made my move. When she drank, she was a really heavy sleeper. Once she was out, I knew she would sleep through anything short of a ground invasion. So I went through her phone and checked her photos. Sure enough, There were no photos from that night. I found that really odd. She'd had drinks tonight, and she would have at least taken photos of whatever cocktail she'd ordered. I sat there with her phone trying to come up with a way to unravel where she'd been that night. Then I remembered her friends. The 3 names that came up often were Sarah, Amy, and Jenna. I checked her contacts for those names and nothing came up for any of them. Red flag number 2. Now I was certain that nothing was as it seemed. Those people didn't exist, and I started doubting that she was even a student at all. I went into her emails and looked for college correspondence. I expected to see emails from the college confirming things like admission, payment, and course registration. I only found 3 emails from the school. The first congratulated her on her admission. The others were reminders that her tuition payment needed to be made before the start of the semester. After that, there was nothing. No emails confirming her payment or congratulating her for completing her admission requirements. The implication left me stunned. My wife was lying to me about being a student. I won't bore you with the rest. I accessed the student portal for her college, and there was no evidence that she'd ever logged in before. The link was blue, both on her phone and her laptop. The username and password sections didn't autofill with anything. The site didn't even show up on her browser history. I was furious. What was she doing during the day? What had she done with the money I gave her? After sitting there fuming for a few minutes, I thought I should dig deeper. There were still unanswered questions, and I was going to get to the bottom of it while she was passed out. So I started going through her social media DMs. No surprise, there were no messages with classmates, no study groups, no professors, just messages with people I didn't know. I went through most of them, and it was all pretty boring stuff. Until I got to Mark. Mark was different. Their messages went back months and started flirty at first. They quickly got a lot more racy, and before long, photos were being exchanged. After that, there were messages setting times for them to meet. I didn't need a calendar to realize they were meeting when she was supposed to be in class. There was more. It got pretty obvious when the money had gone. She'd been spending it on hotel visits and trips with this guy. Here I was thinking I was investing in her future, and she was spending my money behind her back to screw some random guy. I had to restrain myself from shaking her awake right then. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was sitting beside a complete stranger. The disbelief I felt was like someone had just told me my dog talked to them. It was impossible, but the evidence was right here. My wife wasn't who I thought she was. I couldn't stop scrolling through her messages, though. I'd rather have crawled through broken glass than keep going through this filth I was seeing, but I didn't have a choice. I needed to be informed. I'd spent too much time in the dark already. Sometimes I wish I had stopped reading right there. At some point, they started talking about me. There was a lot of complaining about the type of husband I was. She said I was always tied up with work and too busy to take her out to clubs and parties. Never mind that I was the only one providing for the home, and I took her on multiple dates a month. Apparently, that didn't mean anything if she didn't get to go out as often as she liked. Seeing her nag about me to some other guy pissed me off, but it got worse. Mark asked if she was worried about me finding out about them. She replied with a laugh and said I was too weak to leave her even if I knew. I was safe and predictable, and she believed I'd just mope and forgive her, but that I was too spineless to leave. I was livid. I knew she'd misjudged me because I considered our relationship over at that very moment. I wanted to wake her up and shout at her, but it was pointless. With how drunk she was, I wouldn't get anything useful out of her. I decided to wait until the morning before I threw everything I'd found out in her face. I slept on the couch that night. Overnight, I calmed down a little bit. I didn't come close to forgiving her, but I felt like it wasn't enough to just confront her. I wanted to do something to tear her to shreds. She needed to be as miserable as I felt at that moment. It's been 2 weeks since I found out about her lies, and I've started preparing a little surprise for our anniversary. It's just 2 months down the line. I'll update this post and let you all know how it goes. Wow, just wow. The fake college, the made-up friends, and the way she used your hard-earned money to fund her affair. When the time comes, OP, make sure your anniversary surprise is about reclaiming your life and putting her in the rearview mirror. You're stronger than she gave you credit for. Make that anniversary a night to remember. Update. Our anniversary dinner was a complete success. For me, at least. I don't think she enjoyed it, but I'm sure she'll never forget it anytime soon. It was hard staying under the same roof as that woman for another 2 months. I didn't even bother pretending everything was normal, and she noticed it. She asked me what was wrong, but I'd brush her off with vague answers. I didn't have the energy to fake nice with her, and honestly, I enjoyed watching her squirm while she tried to figure out what was bothering me. She probably thought it was a midlife crisis or something because she kept suggesting a vacation. I just kept telling her I was busy with work. Meanwhile, I was busy planning my exit. Our anniversary finally came around, after what felt like 2 years, and I told her I had something special planned. She perked up at the idea of a fancy dinner. She was especially happy when I told her that I'd booked a table at her favorite restaurant. I wanted everything to be perfect for the night I had planned. She got all dolled up for the dinner. She asked how she looked, and I lied and said she looked great. I didn't care how she looked anymore. There wasn't an outfit on that planet that could make her beautiful to me again. Dinner started off normal enough. We ordered food and wine, made small talk, and took a few dozen photos. She seemed relaxed, obviously thinking that the tension between us was gone. After dessert had been served, I decided it was time for business. I handed her the envelope that I had been in my jacket pocket all night. At first, she was excited. She probably thought it was a gift or vacation tickets. She looked confused when she opened the envelope and found an invoice. I knew she wouldn't pay it. It wasn't legally binding or anything. I just wanted to send a message. And judging from the look on her face, she received it, loud and clear. She teared up as she looked up from the paper and started trying to explain herself. I explained that the invoice was for the money she had received from me to pay her tuition, and that I was expecting it back in full. She tried to tell me that she really had paid the tuition, but I cut her off and told her not to dig herself any deeper. Seeing her blubber like this gave me a twinge of satisfaction. People were starting to look at us, but I didn't care. I was never coming back to this restaurant again, and I was happy that I could ruin this place for her. And I was just getting started. Next, I reached under my seat and brought out a large manila envelope. I tried to hand it to her, but she didn't move to take it, so I just flung it onto the table in front of her. She opened this one with her hand shaking, and her whole body sagged when she saw what was inside. Divorce papers. She went from sobbing to pleading. She reached across the table to take my hands and begged me to reconsider. She said she'd pay me back the money. She'd actually go to college. She'd get a job, anything to avoid a divorce. I asked her why she was so desperate to stay when she told Mark I was boring and predictable. I reminded her that she'd assured him I'd never leave her. The tears stopped when she realized I knew everything, and it dawned on her that she was in a much deeper mess than she'd thought. I wasn't surprised when she started stammering out some excuses. She began with the usual BS, claiming nothing happened between us, but quickly switched to, "He means nothing to me." Once she realized I likely knew the truth, I put her out of her misery and told her I'd read all of their messages and sent everything to my lawyer. I mentioned that I'd wanted to pull them all into a third envelope, but I couldn't find an envelope thick enough for it all. I wasn't done there. I told her I'd be moving out the very next day. I'd booked a motel for that night, and I was getting the rest of my stuff the very next day. I'd canceled her cards that were in my name, and I'd stopped funding the joint account ever since I found out about her infidelity. It was almost empty. Good luck to her affording the lease on what little was left in there. She was causing a scene now, but I didn't care. She wasn't my problem anymore. For the first time since I discovered the truth, I felt some degree of peace. It felt like I was taking my life back. I placed some cash on the table to cover the bill and told her to enjoy the rest of her night. Then I left her there, still sobbing. After that night, I blocked her on everything and had my lawyer handle all communication with her. I didn't want anything to do with her again. The only time we saw each other in person after that was during the divorce proceedings. She and Mark were the stars of the show. My lawyer didn't hesitate to bring up the infidelity anytime she tried to ask for too much. We also used her financial infidelity to argue against alimony. Surprisingly, it worked. My lawyer argued that there was a case for fraud, which scared her enough that she agreed to drop alimony requests altogether. After the divorce, I didn't stick around. I moved out of the city and left her behind. I didn't keep in touch with her, but I heard about her from friends. She couldn't afford the rent and had to move back in with her parents. They threatened to kick her out if she kept freeloading, so she'd started looking for teaching jobs. She hadn't had much luck, and I wasn't surprised. It's not like she had any work experience. Life after divorce isn't ever easy, but I was doing pretty well for myself without contacting her. I didn't need the negativity of someone who viewed me as a spineless ATM to use and lie to. If she ever needed to talk to me about anything, she had to go through my lawyer. He told me that she'd begged him to give her my new number on more than one occasion. Naturally, he never obliged her. I was still very pleased to hear how desperate she had been. She still managed to get a hold of my number, though. I don't know who gave it to her. I made the mistake of answering an unknown number and was surprised to hear her hesitant voice. My first instinct was to end the call immediately, but I decided to hear her out. She claimed she just wanted to say hi, but she was begging me to take her back within a few minutes. She said she had nothing without me, and she wanted to have another chance. I wasn't going to give her another chance to worm her way back into my life. I ended the call without a word and blocked that number too. Now I'm a lot more careful about answering unknown numbers and giving my details out to friends and family. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was to the red flags. I really did my best to build my wife up and empower her, but she repaid me by lying to me and insulting me behind my back. Her betrayal says more about her than it does about me, though, and I'm glad that I showed her that I wasn't as weak and spineless as she thought. How's that for predictable? Bravo, OP. She underestimated you at every turn, and it must have felt so good to show her just how wrong she was. Her desperation is her problem, not yours. You've done the hard work of taking your life back, and you deserve every bit of peace and happiness that comes with it. She gambled on your kindness and lost everything. Have you had a partner cheat on you? Tell us your ultimate power move in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon.